Almost no one wants to admit it, but something very strange is happening at the heart of Russia's military machine. This is not a rumour, not propaganda, and not Western exaggeration. It is something anyone can see happening on camera, day after day. The tanks that once symbolised Moscow's power are now returning from the war completely mutilated, burning, twisted, reduced to steel shells that can barely move. And the most shocking part is not the state of these vehicles. It is the desperate decision Russia is now making to try to keep them alive. A decision so absurd, so far outside of military logic that many analysts went silent the moment they saw the first images. If you've been following this war from the beginning, you know the battlefield has changed. But what is happening now is not a change. It is a collapse. A collapse so deep that it is forcing a major power to do something no one would have believed without seeing it. And today you will understand why this decision changes everything. Not only for Russia and Ukraine, but for the future of modern warfare. The armoured vehicles that once represented Moscow's land power now appear in footage completely disfigured, returning from the front lines without a turret, without a cannon, without proper armour, wrapped in improvised structures, and often trying to move even when they are nearly destroyed. What should have been the backbone of the Kremlin's ground forces has turned into a collection of twisted relics that expose not only technical flaws but the complete collapse of a military model that defined Russian doctrine for decades. Recent footage shows tanks returning from combat with engines on the brink of explosion, melted armour, poorly welded cages vibrating with movement, sensors ripped out or burned, and entire sections of the hull deformed by direct impacts. In many videos, the situation is so extreme that the scenes look more like something from a post-apocalyptic landscape than from a modern European war. And that grotesque improvised appearance is precisely what reveals how far Russia has lost the ability to operate armoured vehicles effectively, or even protect them in a war where any exposed vehicle lasts only minutes under the aim of FPV drones. Reliable estimates indicate that Russia has already surpassed 4,000 tanks destroyed since February 2022. That number alone would have been enough to rewrite the military balance of Europe if reported during any 20th century conflict. But the scale of the problem goes far beyond statistics. The most shocking and at the same time alarming detail is not the quantity of vehicles destroyed, but what is destroying them. Instead of being defeated by enemy tanks, by advanced anti-tank missiles, or by massive artillery strikes, the overwhelming majority are being eliminated by FPV drones built with commercial components, assembled by volunteers or small military units, sometimes costing less than a consumer action camera. This absurd contrast, drones costing a few $100s destroying multi-million-dollar armoured vehicles, is one of the clearest symbols of the radical shift taking place on modern battlefields, and it is also proof of how Russia became trapped inside a military logic that no longer works. Russian tanks, designed in previous decades to resist heavy artillery, breach fortified lines and advance deep into enemy territory, now simply cannot survive the attack of a remotely piloted device flown by a soldier on the other side of a field. Armour that was once a source of national pride has become irrelevant against warheads that plunge vertically onto the weakest point of any tank, the top. Russia's response throughout these months has been driven not by innovation or planning, but by improvisation and desperation. The first attempt was to install metal cages on top of tank turrets in an effort to block drones from hitting directly above. But it quickly became clear that these cages could not withstand strong impacts, much less drones equipped with RPG-type warheads. Then came steel plates, rushed to the battlefield and welded around the turret to thicken the improvised armour. After that, layers of barbed wire, steel rods, metal pallets, and even entire scrap structures harvested from destroyed vehicles were added. None of it worked. Ukrainian FPV operators, noticing the reinforced top, changed tactics. Instead of hitting the roof directly, they shifted their trajectory and began striking vulnerable side areas, sensors, reactive armour blocks, and even the engine. And when they noticed those areas were also being reinforced, they adopted the simplest and most devastating solution: destroy the tracks. A tank that cannot move is just a sitting target, and once immobilized, it becomes a steel coffin waiting for the final blow. A single drone is enough to tear off a road wheel, break a track link, or damage a roller. Once stopped, the tank is finished from above with thermobaric charges or incendiary warheads capable of burning at more than 2,700 Swidergruxy, melting metal layers with ease. And it is within this context that Russia made the most shocking decision of the entire war: to remove the turret and cannon completely, turning vehicles designed for direct combat into heavy, improvised armoured personnel carriers. This is not technological evolution, not natural adaptation, and not the result of engineered modernisation. It is, in practice, the confession that Russia can no longer use its tanks as tanks, and this decision only makes sense when you understand the structural problems Russia has carried since the Cold War. BMP troop carriers have extremely thin armour. They are fast, they are light, but they were not built to resist modern warheads, especially drones that can target the weakest points instantly. When a BMP is hit, it does not partially collapse. It detonates. There is not enough interior space to dissipate the explosion, and most soldiers inside die instantly. The situation is so critical that many Russian troops began calling BMPs metal coffins. Tanks, on the other hand, have much stronger armour, but they carry a fatal flaw Russia never corrected: the autoloader system. All ammunition sits under the turret in an exposed carousel. When a drone penetrates this area, the explosion builds internal pressure that must escape somewhere, resulting in the most infamous and tragic image of the war: 12-ton turrets launched into the air, completely torn off the hull. This vulnerability was known since the 1970s and never received a definitive fix. Now it is being exploited daily by drone operators who know exactly where to strike. To make matters worse, Russia's industrial capacity has partially collapsed. Even with factories running non-stop, tank replacement is far too slow. Building a single T-72 or T-80 takes months and requires specialised parts, experienced labour and components often blocked by sanctions. Meanwhile, each destroyed tank on the front takes only seconds from impact to complete loss. This equation, slow production versus rapid destruction, cannot be balanced. This is why in recent months Moscow has ordered turrets removed, ammunition stripped and improvised structures installed to convert tanks into heavy transports. It is not a technical choice. It is a forced one, driven by losses the Kremlin can no longer replace. And when these modified vehicles were captured by Ukraine, the truth was obvious. Many had no ammunition, no reactive armour, no sensors and no functioning combat systems. They were empty steel shells with improvised seating. The problem is that even these shells do not last long. As soon as Ukrainian operators realised the reinforced tops were stopping some attacks, they began targeting the tracks. Fast, cheap immobilisation turned into a highly effective tactic, and once stopped, the modified tanks became deadly traps. Without rear doors, without ramps and without safe evacuation routes, soldiers must climb over sharp metal plates and tangled wire while under fire. Many never make it out. Meanwhile, countries like Israel solved this problem decades ago by converting captured tanks into professionally engineered, heavily protected troop carriers with redesigned armour, new engines and rear ramps. That is what adaptation through engineering looks like, something completely absent in Russia's current reality. Now, hundreds of these improvised vehicles are being deployed to the region of Pokrovsk, where Russia has gathered more than 150,000 troops for what could be one of the largest offensives of the year. Moscow seems to believe that even mutilated, these tanks might offer some advantage. But Ukraine has already studied every weakness, and its drone operators are more skilled and better equipped than ever. Every mapped flaw turns these improvised vehicles into predictable targets, and this could turn Pokrovsk into a massive graveyard of Russian armour. What we are witnessing is not just the destruction of tanks, it is the end of an entire doctrine. Russia, which for decades relied on heavy armoured forces, as the backbone of its military strategy, must now face a battlefield where cheap drones outperform multi-million-dollar vehicles. This shift affects not only Russia, but the future of every modern army. More than a battle, we are watching the end of a military concept, and I want to hear your thoughts. In this scenario, with improvised adaptations, collapsing armour strategies, and a war that is redefining ground combat, do you believe these mutilated tanks have any real chance of making a difference in Pokrovsk? Or are we about to witness yet another chapter in the collapse of Russia's armoured power? Leave your comment and subscribe to the Global Defence Report to follow what is truly happening behind this war.